welcome to the 22nd edition of our Cardano Developer Office Hours. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Darlisa, and I will be your host. So whenever you're already building projects on Cardano or simply curious about the Cardano blockchain technology itself, we're delighted to have you here. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, check the link on the chat and make sure to join us to stay up to date about the next sessions. And just before you dive in, I have just a quick reminder for you. So our Cardano Learn and Hack initiative, that the link is also in the chat, it's still ongoing. So this is a great opportunity for you not only to share your knowledge, but also collaborate with the community and help onboard new developers. So PR submission goes up to July 18, and then you also have the chance to win a time on. So now let's get into today's main session event. So you're excited to have Giovanni Gargiulo with us today, that he's going to give us a live demo on the new Token Registry API v2, which now provides full support to the CIP-68. So, and also share the best practice on how to use the query priority parameter. So if you have any questions during the session, you can just raise your hand or drop in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to have a QA session in the end. Without further ado, Giovanni, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Darlisa, for the beautiful introduction. So let me share my screen so we can start. And there we go. So let's start. First thing first. We got a couple of requests from both the Explorer, the team working on integration with exchanges, as well as community members. So we decided to tackle the integration of the CIP-68, that is the on-chain metadata standard for native assets, fungible native assets. There is also the non-fungible version that has a different standard. I think it's CIP-68, 67, but in this presentation, we only care about the fungible tokens. Back in the days, that was the CIP-26, that is the original one, where that has been mostly used by the community so far. So it did make sense, but it has some drawbacks. So you need to issue a pull request on a repository, then it needs to be reviewed and then eventually merged. So I think the introduction of the support for 68 was required. So there we go. We met a few weeks back, and we were discussing this RFC that has been out for a while now, February this year. If you're interested in what was the rationale and everything, you can go on the GitHub repository under Cardano Foundation, CF Token Metadata Registry. This is the issue number 20. You can have a quick read on what was the rationale for kicking this thing off. There was an initial proposal on the implementation, which has been eventually cleaned up with the support of both Cardano Foundation colleagues and community members. And then there is the final API specification that is available. I'll show you where it is available in a minute. But here there is the full document. As a step of the process, one thing that I really cared about was to renew completely the section on the developers portal about Cardano native assets. So we start from the documentation first, and then we go into the how to use the API. Because I think not enough love was given to this section. So now there are like 3 brand new pages, actually 4 new pages. We go into the details of what's the original standard, the CIP-26, that started as just a temporary solution. And then 4 years later, we're still here using it. And then CIP-68, that I think is a more versatile version. And then there is the final section, that is the actual token metadata registry server and how to deal with it. So we are obviously all familiar with the CIP-26. You issue a pull request on a GitHub repository, it gets reviewed, eventually gets merged when everything is fine. And then after a few hours from the pull request being accepted, the token metadata get eventually merged and then served on the API. Just 2 seconds to explain why we need the metadata. Obviously, this, if you're here for this, you should know it. But for the people that are new, whenever you mint a token on Cardano, you only mint a token with the a name that can mean nothing possibly, but the only thing that you can specify on chain, and the only thing that the chain really cares about, are the monetary policy. So what's the circulating supply, and whether or not the policy is open or closed, meaning that you can mint more or burn at a later stage. Additional information like what's the actual name of the token, what are the decimal points, what the website of the project is. These are all information that cannot be put on the minting transaction, but can be specified later, or can be part of the minting transaction, exactly as the CIP-68 does. So if you're curious about how to use this, just go through the 2 pages, 26 and 68, and there is a section on the pros and cons of each token, and you can find out, if you want to mint a new token, what approach is the one that better suits your need. In the meantime, I see there is a question from Michiel. Right, so that's a great question, Michiel. I'm going to go into a deeper explanation about this later, but this is one of the points of the RFC. Indexing token metadata API specification, API spec. But the API actually is compatible with both metadata, and it has a parameter called priority. Now it's called query priority, that basically let the user decide which one of the 2 standards should be taken as the main one. So obviously the priority by default is given to CIP-68, because that's the one that we're going to be endorsing to use, because it's more versatile and you can use the standard straight away within a smart contract that we think is very valuable as a thing. But you can redefine the query priority and say, I only want 26, I only want 68, or I want 26 before 68, or vice versa. In the case of 68 before 26 is actually by default, so you can just skip it straight away. Into the documentation of the Cardano Token Metadata Registry, there is a special section dedicated to this. So if you want set specific standard priority, there you go. So you can go through this set of examples and it show you exactly how this thing works. But we will show we'll go through this in just a couple of minutes. So the last thing that I wanted to say is that beside the explanation of the 2 standards, here now is there is yet another page about how to use the API. So the API used to have the so-called legacy API v1 that only serves 26, and this API really serves a lot of content when you're hitting the endpoint, which is usually not what the people are interested about. Like the only thing that mostly people are interested about is just like ticker, name, description, and how many decimals, or maybe the website. But you're not interested in all the proofs, the signatures, so on and so forth. You trust that, you assume that this is fine. Obviously, if you're interested in verifying, there are tools for doing that as well. So stay with me for a minute. So the first thing is that the API docs should be available here. So you can basically parse, this is an open API standard. So if you parse this thing in a pretty print way, let's see how this thing works. So you have a full explanation of what the API v1 is, and there should be somewhere below a v2 version. There we go. There are 2 endpoints, but instead of going to the API, open API, it is a little bit confusing and very, very lengthy because we wrote plenty of documentation. I'm just going to give you an example in just 2 minutes, and that's going to be much easier to understand. So key features. So API v2 improves API v1 because we now support both 26 and 68. 26 again is off-chain, so you need to provide your data on a GitHub repo. You can learn more at this link, CIP-26. While 68, the metadata are persisted on chain as part of the minting transaction. So you do not have to provide all the signatures, those kind of things, because it's everything on chain. So the trust is maximized. Then let's skip one second the priority parameter. It's a RESTful interface, so it's extremely similar to the one of the v1, but by default is more concise. So it only returns the bare minimum amount of data that are required. So and I believe is very simple and straightforward to use. Validation and security, obviously, if you're interested into the off-chain part of the 26, all the signatures, you just flag, you add an additional query params, and then the API returns all the signatures. So if you want your guarantee, you can verify yourself. While for 68 is much simpler, much more straightforward because it's an on-chain transaction. Scalability, we leveraged Yashi Store that supports 2 different ways of read-write and read-only. This means that we can horizontally scale the back end of the, and you can do the same if you want to run, because obviously the project is open source. So you can have like one token metadata registry in read-write mode, and then as many readers as you want by just like flagging, switching a flag into the deployment thing. And so you can basically horizontally scale as many as you want. We are currently running 1 read-write and I think 3 read-only replica. So there is like a ton of traffic that we can support, no problem. And going back to the query parameters, I think it's now time to really explain what this thing is. So as Miki and my colleague was asking, there are some tokens that support both 26 standard and 68 standard. So how do we go about that? Like, which one are we going to returning? So we take no actions, like we take no decisions, but we recommend a priority, which is a 68 over 26. But then we give complete freedom to the user to decide which standard do they want. So if they prefer to have like the 26 standard, you can just set this param to 26, only 26, and you will only see 26 metadata returned. And I'll give you an example shortly. And then there is a CIP-68. You can decide that you only want 68 because it's the safest, right? Because it's straight away on chain. It can't be tampered by someone else. Or you can get a mix, a combination of the two. And I'll actually show you that sometimes this helps because sometimes, at the very least at the beginning, the CIP-68 wasn't completely well understood, and someone may have misunderstood the name of one of the params. And so you can get some params from the 68, some metadata from the 68, some parameters from the 26. Right, without further ado though, I think it's about time to start to see how this thing works, right? Darlisa.
Sorry to interrupt you too. There is a question in the chat from Kartik. So
Sure.
He's asking how long it would take to sync up the CIP to get all the CIP-68 on-chain data. That's a
really good question, right? Obviously, Yashi Store, that is the component that is digesting the bytes on data bytes, it needs to go from some time into the past, which was like the first time a token was minted up until TIP. So with the time required will grow, but at the moment it's just like a bunch of hours, so 3-4 hours to cross and to parse the whole chain. We might decide in the future to prepare a dump, which is just like, I don't know, a few hundred kilobytes. But obviously, whoever is using this needs to trust this thing, unless we go down the route of using mutual signature for this. But I think it's like shooting way too high. But I don't expect this to take more than just a few hours, half a day in the next 4 or 5 years, because all that is doing is just checking if there is a minting transaction. So parsing this thing is extremely fast. Again, just a few hours. It won't take too long. But then the beauty of this is that once it reaches TIP, new tokens that are minted will be actually available in real time. So you just like issue the transaction, and less than a minute later, the API will have already seen the token. So let's. I hope this answered the question. So let's start with an example call. You can see that we're still using the subjects path name. Some people call it subject, some people call it unit. But we decide, because there is like no final, like no definitive like name for this, we decided to just leave subjects so that there is a minimum amount of effort required to migrate from V1 to V2. We just had to leave as is because it's not critical information there. So we can just like start to play around this. And now, as you can see, like the API is blazing fast and returns basically the bare minimum amount of data required. So one of the requirements from the team working with the exchanges is that we don't care about all the API v1 signatures contain. We just want the metadata, right? And the answer, the metadata reply is very simple and tells you the name, the name of the attribute, the metadata attribute, in this case is name, and the value, right? And then tells also the source. Because as you can see for URL, where URL is the default name for the project's website, and the Fluid tokens guys, they set website instead of URL. So you will not see website, but you will see URL, and you will see the property just sent there. In this case, it's CIP-26. Why is this? Why this is happening? Because the query parameter has been set by default as a 68/26. So if the same attributes are present in both, you will see 68 first and 26 later. If 68 is missing, it falls back on 26. The opposite is true as well. So if you want 26/68, you will have to specify it, but we'll see that in a minute. Obviously, you might be interested in a smaller response. So if you're only, for instance, interested in the name of the token, the ticker, and the decimals, which usually, for instance, for DEXs could be like the most important thing. So you want a smaller payload. We can test this one. So obviously, sorry, I forgot about saying that the response also tells you what is the query priority returned. So if by any chance in the future we decide to change it and say, no, or we add another standard, sorry, forgot about this. This API, the API v2 is extensible. So if tomorrow there is going to be like a CIP-100, for instance, we can include that as well. And we can have like a default priority is going to be 100, 68, 26 if you want. But if you're on the mobile device and you want to minimize the amount of traffic that goes on the mobile, you can just say, oops, what is this? Sorry. You say, I'm only interested in the name, ticker, and decimals. You can have like a smaller reply, and you can see now only the name, ticker, and decimals are available in the response. So you can actually minimize the amount of stuff that is returned on the while. For just one call, it doesn't make much sense, but if you're fetching hundreds of tokens, you start to save on bytes, especially on the mobile devices. It actually makes a huge difference. Or if you're batch fetching, again. Now, such just a specific, the attribute you need to specify is called property. It's a list. So for every one that you want, you need to specify it again. So you go property name and property ticker and property decimals. It's not a comma separated list, so CSV, but a proper use of the query param. In this case, and we start to go into the more technical things, if you only want response from the CIP-68, you just set as a query priority 68 only. So let's go back 1 second to the very first call that I was doing, right? So you see that there is a URL 26 here for the Fluid tokens token, which has both obviously 26 and 68. If I only, if I only specify now that I want the 68 standard, you can see that there is no URL anymore because the name of the attribute is missing in this case. So there is no 26, there is only 68 everywhere. And you say also, you get confirmation by the fact that in the query priority, only 68 is returned. There is no 26 at all. And that's another good thing. And then now this is the fun part. My screen is going to go insane because what we do here is to show CIP's details. Basically, so far, the only attributes you've seen into the response is the subject, so confirmation about what the actual token we are returning metadata of, the actual metadata, and then outside there is the query priority. But you're not seeing CIP-specific payloads. This is just like a concise version of the metadata. If you want the full shebang, you just flip the show CIP's details flag to true, and then you will get as much detail as you can. And this includes, I'll go from the top, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff in here. So you still get the usual response, but you also get standard specific. This is a new field that only appears when you switch that CIP details thing to true. And so you start to get a CIP standards specific stuff. So the first one obviously is CIP-26, and you get basically the V1 payload. It gives you the public signature, the signature, the public key, and all the nitty-gritty low-level details. Because obviously someone might be interested in still validating those things. So instead of just having to use two different APIs, so V1 and V2, you can use, just forget about V1, just use V2, flip the flag, and then you get all the data, so you can run your own verification and see that this signature is actually, sorry, that this public key is the correct public key for this signature, so you can validate all your content yourself. And here there is, I think there is an image. Is that correct? Logo. Yeah, there is the logo here. And there is a signature for the logo as well. And then, yeah, for the 68, it's like it's super minimum because it's literally just the data that has been pushed on the blockchain, and it's just like key value, which obviously is a good thing, because on chain you want to keep as little as possible. Let me see if there is anything else. I think with this, yeah, sorry, there is one more thing. Obviously, if you're interested only in one token at a time, the get endpoint, which is, sorry, I'm going to just scroll to the top very quickly. The get endpoint is the one you want. But if you're loading your API or your service, whatever, for the very first time, you might be interested in bulk fetching. And this is like this is the documentation for you. It's just a simple post. Again, it's extremely similar to V1. So if you use V1, you just literally change the V2 thingy and you just tweak a little bit the response, and that's literally it. It supports exactly the same query params as before for the get endpoint, with the only difference that if you want properties, specific properties, this time is part of the body of the request. It didn't make sense to have it in the query params, because otherwise you would split the two things. I don't think it's nice. I think it's much better designed this way. And so here we can, there is a curl example for this. These are a 26 token and a 68 token. So you can see how it works. So we are querying OSCI token and the fluid token, and you can see that with just one call, we didn't specify anything else than the two subjects here. And we said we just want a name and ticker, and then we let the API do the magic. So for fluid tokens, there was obviously 68, which out-trumped 26, and you will only see 68. For OSCI token, obviously back in the days, there wasn't a 68, there was only 26, and so the API only returns 26. So it gives you like the best response with the minimal effort. And that's and I think that's it. Example request. I think there is a limit to, I want to say, 20 tokens you can batch at a time. You can check. We can check the API later, but yeah, the API is very fast. There is no need to batch hundreds of tokens. So just a small, medium-sized requests would be the ideal. But if you have questions, you can ask now or open issues on the GitHub repository. There are a couple of things ongoing. I'm checking with community members a couple of things. But if you have questions about usage or suggestions on how to improve this, just create a new issue. I am the maintainer of this thing now, so I get notification, and as long as you don't ping me over the weekend in a couple of hours, you should get at least an acknowledgement of the issue being received. And in conclusion, it's worth to mention that the project is obviously open source, right? So you can go and check the code base here. But we also provide a Docker Compose manifest for you to start to play with it and possibly operate. Obviously, while we suggest you to play with it and to run your own infrastructure with this Docker Compose, if you need to run this for a professional business case, I encourage you to just come up with a proper infrastructure solution. This is just like a quick start. You know, we would not recommend to use this for production purposes, but it's definitely fantastic, perfect to use this Docker Compose to start playing with it, like and to operate your own token metadata registry. Just very quickly, I can show you how it works. So this is my token metadata registry. We are on main. We pull the latest version. So what was the difference here? I just using the latest tag. So 120, and then you can go Docker compose app-t. That's literally everything you need just to run this thing, and it'll be up and running. Obviously, I mentioned this before because it was one of the questions from during the presentation. Token metadata registry needs a couple of hours to ingest. The first time you launch it, and just for the very first time you launch it, it needs to ingest all the existing tokens metadata, and it takes a few hours, right, for both the off-chain part and the on-chain part. But for the on-chain part, you can actually tail the logs. So Docker logs-f, the API, and you can actually see that the beautiful Yashi store is now quickly indexing from, this is from token, is it 7 million? So it's like Alonso, we are still in Alonso, because there can't possibly be token issued that far away. This is when the CIP was actually written. So just to be sure, we went that far down, that far back. But also the syncing time is very fast. My node is not on the same machine, so this could go even faster if you're operating a Cardano node on the same box, so that the network latency is literally more than cut in half. I bet this will go down to 100 milliseconds or less. And then that's it. So when you get to tip, you know that blocks and tokens are ingested in real time, and then you'll be good to go. And one last thing, sorry, just as we're wrapping up, the env file, you can customize it here. So this is the default one. Obviously, you can change where the database is. Again, this is just example stuff. So please don't use this for production. Just customize it in a way that is suitable for your operations. And these two, this flag here, token metadata sync job, needs to be, if you want to just run everything in one go, needs to be set to true. So it will also fetch the CIP-26 metadata. And that's it, guys. Have fun playing with the token metadata registry. See you the next time.